Well, the Ohio State Buckeyes with a 59-31 win over the Purdue Boilermakers. I'm not sure I saw that coming. In fact, I can promise you I didn't, because in our game predictions, I said it would be 42-22. The Buckeyes had 45 points at halftime. We got plenty to break down here from the Horseshoe in Columbus, part of our instant analysis postgame show on BuckeyesNow. Join us live here in Columbus on Buckeye Breakdown.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State
with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today.
Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness, is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Horseshoe, where today the Ohio State Buckeyes put it on Purdue 59-31. I'm Brendan Gulick, along with Andrew Lind. This is our live post-game reaction from Ohio Stadium, where Ohio State today, I thought, made quite a statement. This was not a perfect game. Let's get one thing straight. The Buckeyes, believe it or not, they actually could have executed better, even on the offensive side. But this was as resounding a victory against as good a team as Ohio State's had all year. And to me, that's the biggest takeaway is, you know, they went up against a team that has quality wins. They're ranked top 20 in the country. They've got a top 15 defense. And Ohio State absolutely shredded them today.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point. I think that if this Purdue team played at Iowa or against Michigan State at home again this week, I think they would have beat them again. I think that that's the type of Purdue team that we saw today, especially offensively with O'Connell and David Bell. Like, those are just two fantastic players. I mean, I cannot believe that O'Connell is a former walk-on, only making like his fifth start, because he can really throw the ball, and I think that he showed that today. But obviously, you know, Ohio State, the story of the game was really just offensively, Garrett Wilson coming back and making up for not being in the game last week because he was out at Nebraska. And you know, he really showed why any of Ohio State's three starting receivers could be considered the best wide receiver in the country.
I mean, Garrett Wilson today was like otherworldly good. I mean, the touchdown catch he had on the right side of the end zone for his second score was, I mean, truly as good a catch as any Buckeyes made all year. The body control required and the timing to make sure the defensive back can't really disrupt that play. You're literally talking about a guy who's making NFL caliber, you know, plays while he's still playing in college. And, you know, I wrote about this over on BuckeyesNow.com. I think most of the year, I am at least under the impression that most of our fans kind of viewed Chris Olave as like maybe just marginally better than Garrett Wilson. I don't know if I've really truly put them as 1-2 as much as it's been 1A and 1B. But a day like today, man, and I don't want to take anything away from Olave. I mean, he is a really good player. He's an elite player. Chris Olave is going to be a first-round draft pick. Garrett Wilson is special. I mean, what he did today was absolutely unbelievable. And the fact that he did it the day, or I should say the week after not playing when Ohio State still got it going offensively, I think just further punctuated how important he is for this offense and what a luxury to have him.
Yeah, I think that if you look at their two games individually, I think that one thing that Chris Olave does a lot better than Garrett, I mean, not necessarily a lot better because, you know, you're talking about two of the best players, but I think that he is a more technical, you know, more he's able to run his routes a little bit better, I think. And then Garrett, I think he just has, you know, such a great catch radius as evidence, you know, on that touchdown, and, you know, just the ability to turn nothing into something. And he did that, you know, on the run. Like that was just a simple, you know, kind of handoff. And next thing you know, he's in for 6. So, you know, it's really exciting to see that kind of effort from the offense. And really, it doesn't matter who it is. You know, last week we saw, you know, Garrett was out and Jackson has 15 catches. You know, Garrett's back this week. He becomes a focal point of the offense, and then look what he does. You know, has 4 touchdowns.
I thought it was pretty impressive that Ohio State jumped out to the lead they did. The first 25 plays that Ohio State ran from scrimmage, 18 of them were on the positive side of midfield. They were getting good field position, and obviously capitalizing on mistakes. Right? You know, they had a couple of, you know, longer scoring drives in terms of yardage, not necessarily timing. as soon as Jaron Cage fell on a fumble and Trevion Henderson the next play takes it 57 yards to the house. The play that I think every special teams coordinator in America draws up in their head and thinks like, man, maybe this could work. Let's kick it just short enough with just enough backspin to make somebody hesitate. And the Buckeye, kickoff coverage unit, which has been so good this season and totally underrated, not talked enough about, lit up the return man, caused a fumble, and Ohio State scores very shortly thereafter. Those are the kinds of things to me, and this is going to sound silly saying it because they're currently ranked inside the top 4. But I think about what we learned from last Tuesday's college football playoff rankings, where it became very clear that the committee has as subjective a viewpoint this year and subjective, impressions that translate to rankings. There's no reason that Michigan State should be ranked behind Michigan after having beaten them on the field when their resumes are so similar. But the committee thinks that Michigan is a better team because they are acting that way. I can't see a scenario where when Ohio State goes out and whoops a team as good as Purdue, I can't see a scenario where the Buckeyes aren't going to be in the college football playoff unless somehow they lose multiple times here, because they are passing every piece of the eye test.
Yeah, and I would go out as far as to say, go out on a limb and say that, like, I don't see a reason that Ohio State won't be number 2 in the country.
Absolutely.
By the time the playoff rankings come out, because, like you said, if they're talking about who the best team is, and the committee chairperson said specifically, that Michigan was a more complete team than Michigan State, despite beating, Michigan State winning on the field. And like, if you're going to compare Ohio State and Oregon, say they both went out, you're not going to tell me that Oregon is a more complete team than Ohio State, despite beating them on the field, 9 weeks ago. So I think that that's something, and it speaks to really just, every single layer of the game, offensively, defensively, and then, like we saw today, special teams. When they're flying down the field and you have, a former walk-on who played on the club team and Chris Booker making plays, like, he's not somebody who is going to be a star anywhere, but he's really making those plays that really show how deep and talented that Ohio State is.
And I don't want to get too far away from this game, right? I mean, we've talked about the college football playoff this week. We'll talk about it again this upcoming week. But the reality is, you're trying to find the 4 best teams in college football. You're watching one of them here in Columbus. There is no doubt in my mind right now that Ohio State is playing like one of the top 4 teams in college football. The balance, the explosiveness, Trevion Henderson again today was outstanding. I realize the defense probably feels like they didn't play well enough. And yet, here we go again with the offense scoring 59 points, and it makes the defensive struggles feel a little bit less impactful. Bryson Shaw, Ronnie Hickman, Cody Simon spoke with us just behind us actually here post game. And, I thought they took like a very almost aggressive nature in answering their questions. Like, hey, not good enough from us today. And, Bryson Shaw, I asked him how he's gotten better since week 1, and he kind of pointed out his flaws. And I was like, I wasn't trying to, pick that apart there. I recognize they're hungry and that they're trying to get better and that they need to play better against really high-level teams. But I want to recognize today for what it was, because that game was over. I mean, seriously, halfway through the first quarter, it was over. It's not that Purdue didn't play hard. They had no answer for Ohio State at all.
I'd say, and I think that that's the biggest thing. And you mentioned, obviously, the defense. They said that they didn't really take it easy or rest at any point in time, which I thought was very, just a very interesting thing for them to say, because when the game gets out of hand like that and, it's not really competitive, you're going to score practically every single time you have the ball. It's very easy to kind of let your foot off the gas, but you could tell that every single time Purdue scored, they were not happy about it. And I think that just speaks to, maybe how the defense is focused right now. And, they know that they can't play like that once the playoff rolls around, because they will get exposed in that situation. So, I do think on one hand, and I said this off camera, that I think that, this Purdue offense is the best offense that Ohio State is going to face until at least the playoff. I don't think, especially at quarterback play, I don't think that the next 2 games, maybe even if you get Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship, I don't think that Graham Mertz is like any better than Aiden O'Connell. But, I think that the combination of his ability to throw the ball plus having an all Big Ten receiver, and I think not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the coaches and the media are going to have a heck of a time trying to figure out who the first team wide receivers in the conference are. So
they're all wearing
I mean, they are, but I think that, we saw last week with Jackson Smith and Jigba not being named the offensive player of the week in the Big Ten. And it was, Dotson from Penn State and O'Connell. I do think that there's a situation where you might have one of them left out, and it's going to be crazy, and Ohio State fans are going to riot, and maybe rightfully so. But yeah, like I said, I just think that this is probably one of the best offenses that they're going to face this year. And, it really was a beneficial thing, especially like Jansen Dunn, Burke. He's out there, going toe to toe with Bell, who's one of the best wide receivers in the country. So, like I said, this is something that is going to benefit them in the long run. But at the same time, I recognize and understand that they weren't happy with the effort that they had in certain situations.
I think we acknowledged all week that David Bell is the real deal. He is a very good wide receiver. He's going to play in the NFL for sure. You kind of knew he was going to get his yards because Purdue's offense, they're kind of one-dimensional. They really haven't run the ball well all year. They averaged 77 yards per game on the ground through their first 9 games, and today they ran it 19 times for 91 yards. Their longest run of the day was 11 yards. So you kind of knew they had 481 yards of total offense. You kind of had that hunch that they were going to come out and try to sling it, right? I mean, that's what they do. That's the DNA of their offense. And I didn't really mind at all that David Bell had 100 yards receiving. Frankly, I would have been surprised if he didn't. What I was impressed with was that his longest reception was for 23 yards. In fact, he didn't even have the longest play of the day. Similar to Dotson, similar to, a couple of games earlier this year when you're facing some other good wide receivers. The Buckeye defense did a pretty good job of just making sure they didn't give up the super big play, because Ohio State's offense has been able to outscore any of their missteps all year. And as long as the defense continues to progress, I don't know if this team is, I don't know if they're national championship good. I think we've still got to see what they're made of here with some huge games coming. But I sure as heck feel pretty good right now compared to where we did September 11th when Oregon was here.
Yeah.
And this team was a mess. Had talent, but they were a mess. We've seen unbelievable growth, and certainly some on the defensive side of the ball since then.
Yeah, and I think you made a really good point there with mentioning that they keep everything in front of them, and I think that that's the biggest difference. If you look back to the September 11th game against Oregon, you'll see C.J. Verdell just running right up the middle with not a single person around him. And then in these games, they're keeping everything in front of them, and that is obviously what has been the key. We look back to last year when they played Indiana, everything in that game, obviously that didn't go well. Ty Freifogel just went wild because they weren't making tackles. They weren't keeping things in front of them. And then that's the difference between this year's team and last year's team. If you look at last week, Jahan Dotson, he had his catches. He had 11 yards, 140, or had his catches, 11 catches, 140 yards, whatever. But he never really got involved like he did the year before, when he had the 3 ridiculous touchdown catches. So, it's one of those things. They're allowing these guys to get the ball, but they're not letting them take it and go beyond that.
I don't want this to come across as like an Ohio State homer thing, because I think we do a pretty good job of trying to be objective, but also recognizing good play when we see it. And there's been a heck of a lot of good play this year. So when we say things like Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba should all be first team all Big Ten, I think we say that from an objective standpoint, recognizing that Dotson is pretty darn good, that David Bell is pretty darn good. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. There was a pretty good receiver at Maryland. I just think there's a reason why Ohio State has had this engine going, right? They've got more 5-star players on their current roster than the rest of the Big Ten does combined. And it's been like that year after year after year now. So it's not just an innate talent thing. There's a coaching element. There's a development, part to this. But it's really, really fun when you can see super talented players playing in a good conference. Let's not get lost here in the fact that the Big Ten is really good this year, right? When Ohio State goes out and eviscerates Purdue, and honestly, I mean, there was a point I literally, you're pacing it along. They were on track to score 100 points, right? Actually, way more than that. They had 35 points 2 minutes into the second quarter. They darn near scored 50 in the first half. When I don't want to get lost in beating up on teams that aren't Alabama, what we used to know and think of as Clemson, what we certainly look at now is Georgia and some of these other big programs around the country. You could argue that right now, one of the two best divisions in football, and maybe the best division in football, is the Big Ten East. And Ohio State has proven it with a good win over Purdue. I know they're not ranked. Look what Purdue did today against a good Michigan team. Purdue is not an unranked team to me. And again, I don't want to get too far off topic here, but Purdue was number 4 in the country until they stubbed their toe a couple of times. Clifford got hurt. They are way better than being an unranked team. Nebraska's a tough place to play. The Buckeyes come home and they beat up on a very good Purdue team. I got to imagine Michigan State is excited for the chance to play. But after Michigan State loses to Purdue and watches what Ohio State just did to them, that's demoralizing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that the biggest thing for Ohio State, if you want to just throw out, who the opponents are, and we hear Ryan Day talk about it in this room all the time. It's not necessarily about who they're playing, but rather about what they're doing themselves. And I think that today they took a big step forward, especially in the red zone, because last week, in the week prior against Penn State and Nebraska, they were just really struggling in the red zone, and they were settling for field goals when, if you're settling for field goals in big games, you're not going to win, especially with how today's offenses are. So for them to get that stuff back on track, for them to be grinding out the extra yards, Day talked about today with Travion Henderson, when he's turning 3-4 yard runs into 6-7 yard runs, and the offensive line is pushing behind him to give him those extra yards. I think that those are important steps, that it doesn't matter who they're playing, but rather just how they're improving themselves. Because once you do get to, playing those teams, those name brand teams that people seem to only care about, there's a reason that they play 13 games before that, because they obviously have to improve upon things and get better week to week. And I think that that's really been happening, especially today. I think they took a really good step forward offensively, especially in the red zone.
I also want to point out here, because I don't think he gets enough credit. It's brought up Ryan Day is an offensive guru, right? But watching him call plays is so much fun, because when you've got really good playmakers, and let's not kid ourselves, he's playing with a Lamborghini, right? This isn't, he's not trying to jumpstart his Prius in the parking lot, okay? He's got ridiculously good players, but the art of play calling, if you're trying to pay attention to, getting inside a coach's head and figuring out how it works, go watch the touchdown that I believe was Ohio State's third score. Let me pull it up here so I don't give you the wrong one. It was the fourth Ohio State touchdown. The throw to Jackson Smith-Njigba that went for about 20 yards into the left corner of the end zone. It came out of a trips formation on the left-hand side, and they were in the same exact formation the play prior. And it's hard for me to describe it without you seeing it. So I would encourage you, if you haven't seen the highlight, or if you have the ability to go back and watch it, the defensive backs essentially lined up the play prior and kind of had Ohio State reasonably well marked. The Buckeyes went right back to the same formation, but made an awesome adjustment that freed up a straight shot to the end zone, where all three defenders kind of looked at each other, right? And Ryan Day clearly saw something in the way those guys had lined up, saying, hey, this is the perfect way to call this play, to put them in a confusing spot. And I mean, you could argue it might have been their easiest touchdown of the day. It's just fun to know that when you've got elite players and elite coaching, you're going to continue to get really, really good results.
Yeah, I think Tommy mentioned this last week. Sometimes it just feels like he's just toying with defenses, and that's the situation because you'll see teams that line up in a formation and run the exact same play back to back, and Ryan Day has about 8 different plays out of that one formation, and he sees something that worked or something that kind of freed open Jackson in that play, and then went right back to it, and it obviously resulted in 6. So I think that you made a really good point, and sometimes it gets very easy to overlook that just because of the type of players that they have, like you said. But at the end of the day, if the players, you can have all the talent in the world, but if the players aren't being put in a position to succeed, then they're not going to do it.
We're going to wrap with a thought on the defense here because I've certainly seen a lot of comments here, and it seems like a good number of you are frustrated with the defense. I agree. They gave up 481 yards of offense, and you gave up 31 points. I think the thing I'm walking away from this game saying, I'm comparing the defense today to where it was in weeks 1 and 2, especially week 2, where everything felt surgical for Oregon. There was no answer. There were guys that were in wrong spots. There were awful angles of pursuit, bad open field tackling, a defensive line that couldn't generate any pressure at all. Purdue's offensive line is not bad. I mean, it's not Minnesota. It's not Oregon. Those are probably the 2 best offensive lines the Buckeyes are going to see all regular season. But I like the progress the defense has made, and I'm okay with Ohio State winning games because the offense is so good and they're giving up shorter plays. It's hey, you can't give up a 58-yard touchdown or some 75-yard touchdown, right? It's those back-breaking, game-changing plays. And at the same point, when your offense isn't turning the ball over, it's taking that much pressure off the defense. They don't have to be perfect, right? Like Ohio State is capable of, I'm telling you right now, they could beat Alabama. This team could absolutely beat Alabama. And you might see Georgia. That. Well, I'm going to wait to go there. They probably have the talent to do it, but Georgia's defense is stupid. I want to see Ohio State do it against Michigan State and Michigan before I go there. But I guess my point here is, especially in watching today against a very good passing attack, right? Even Purdue, whose offense is one-dimensional, you knew Purdue wasn't going to come in here and run the ball, and they still threw for 390 yards, right? As a defense, you know they're going to throw it. As an offense, they know they're going to throw it, and they still did it. That should frustrate you.
Yeah.
But the Buckeyes did a good enough job of not giving up home run plays that the game was never really in doubt.
And I think that to that point, there's times that you go into games and you understand and you just know that, there's really no point in spending so much effort in trying to completely shut their offense down, like passing the ball down, because it's just not going to happen. Like, as much as you want to try, you can sit there and you can beat your head into the wall a million times, but you're not going to stop David Bell from getting 10 catches. You're not going to stop Aiden O'Connell from throwing for 300 yards. It's just the way that Purdue's offense is. And I think that, and especially if you watch the defensive line too, they weren't able to get pressure because as soon as O'Connell was getting the ball, he was getting it out of his hands into somebody else who was making a play. Those things are just things that you have to kind of accept. And like we talked about earlier, they got the players down as soon as, they would get the ball. There wasn't too many big plays, kept most of the stuff in front of them. And I think that's so much more important than looking at the stat sheet and saying, oh, well, Aiden O'Connell got his, David Bell got his. That's to be expected. And I don't think that you can really harp too much on that stuff.
A couple of quick stat notes just in case you missed them during the game. The Buckeyes certainly had good performances all the way around, but C.J. Stroud, 361, 5 touchdowns, no picks. I'm pretty sure it's the third time this year that he's had a 5-touchdown, 0 interception game. He was 31 of 38 today. Very, very efficient with the football. For as well as Travion Henderson ran, Mayan Williams was actually the team's rushing leader, 14 carries for 117, but it was 2 rushing touchdowns for Travion Henderson that stole the spotlight because he's now got 17 touchdowns combined between what he's caught out of the backfield and what he's run for, which means he is one shy of tying Maurice Claret's Ohio State single-season freshman touchdown record. Sits at 18, and I would say with at least 2 and perhaps 3 or 4 or 5 potentially games left in the season, who knows? I sure like Travion Henderson's chances of breaking that record, but we'll see if maybe next week if he could do it at home against the Spartans. Other than that, the receiving leader today, Jackson Smith-Njigba, 9 catches for 139. Garrett Wilson had 10 catches for 126. Those two combined for 4 touchdowns. Chris Olave was forgotten. I don't know, 9 catches for 85 and a touchdown. And he had a 45-yarder that was taken off the board because of what I thought was kind of a bad holding call, but that's okay. That happens.
And let's not forget, he's 1 touchdown away from tying David Boston's career receptions touchdown record. So, next week against Michigan State might end up being a pretty celebratory game.
It's funny how, we're at this point in the season. There was so much uncertainty coming in the year at quarterback. You knew you had good talent. You certainly liked your chances of this team making the right pick, whomever that pick was going to be. It took a couple weeks for maybe fans to say, man, CJ's the guy. Once he came back after missing the Akron game, he's been unbelievably good. He made 2 bad throws that resulted in picks last week, and he made a couple of other questionable decisions, but he's largely been very, very good. And today, I think he helped his Heisman candidacy. That is a very real possibility in a Heisman race that is wide open across the country. It's just amazing to me how, we're at the point in the season where you start thinking, okay, what could the postseason really, truly look like? And I mean, we're talking about an offense that might actually be achieving at a higher level than what we saw with Justin Fields. And I got to be honest, I'm actually having a little bit of a hard time still wrapping my head around that because Justin is such a good player. The talent on the Buckeye offense that has surrounded Stroud is so elite that I think it's just helped his growth. It's helped his confidence for sure. And now this group is cooking. And it sure is fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, one of my biggest thoughts from today, just seeing the offense click, I think that it reminds me a lot of LSU in 2019. They weren't great, particularly defensively, but then, their offense was just so far and away better than everybody else in the country. So, for Ohio State to be in that position, and it's also crazy to think that CJ Stroud now has as many or more touchdown passes, I can't remember the exact number, than Troy Smith had during his Heisman Trophy winning season in 2006. So if you want to talk about how much offense has changed in the last 15 years, you can look right to that.
I think David brings up a good point. I don't want to dive too deep into that now because I think we could do a lengthy podcast on defensive coordinating. The reality is the Buckeyes have what they have right now, both from a coaching staff, from a scheme, and from a personnel standpoint. It has gotten better. Is it good enough to win a national title this year? I don't think we know that yet for sure. The rushing attack that the Buckeyes are going to see the next 2 weeks is pretty darn good. You might have the leading candidate for the Heisman Trophy coming in here next week in Kenneth Walker. And you've got a really good 1-2 punch in the backfield with the team up north and Hassan Askins and Blake Corum. And I'll tell you what, if you watched any of that Michigan-Penn State game today, it's not just Aiden Hutchinson on the defensive line. Both of their defensive ends are harassing quarterbacks at kind of an alarming rate. It's going to be fun. These are 2 really, really big games coming up. I think the Buckeyes have a ton of momentum as they go into the second to last week of the regular season. How is it possible? We're already talking about that.
Last home game next week, too.
That's right. Last game with the shoe coming up here on Saturday. It's a noon kick against Michigan State. We got a lot more planned for you here this upcoming week, including tomorrow morning. We'll sleep on it. We'll let you know what we think tomorrow morning, too, and tell you what we learned from this one after watching a little bit of the film as well. Our coach, Tommy Zagorski, as always, on Sunday mornings will join us. We hope you'll join us tomorrow morning. Should be live right around 8 a.m. Eastern time. If you miss it live, we certainly would love to have you live. We'd love to interact with you, but if you miss it live, we'll have it for you on demand after the fact. For Andrew Lind and for Eddie Murata, who's producing back in our studio, I'm Brendan Gulick. Ohio State 59, Purdue 31, a pretty impressive win here at the Shoe. See you soon. Please, if you would, follow us on our social media channels. We would really appreciate the support there. Thanks for subscribing to our YouTube channel as well. See you over on BuckeyesNow.com.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State
with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today.
Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness, is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.